listener production.
Hello, happy Friday and welcome to The Briefing. I'm Sasha Barbagat. All this week, we've been bringing you stories about how to start your 2025 in the best way possible. But amidst all the positivity, sometimes it's just hard to avoid the inevitable blues that might be setting in as we get back to work and reality.
We all have a purpose, even if it's unrealised, but we all have a reason for getting up in the morning. If you can keep that forefront Monday through to Sunday, it will turn around, it will transform how you feel.
For our final ep in this week's series, how to be hopeful and take care of yourself in 2025. That's in the second half of this episode. But first, of course, we have to get into the headlines with Chris Spyrou on Friday, January 10.
Morning, Sash. Morning, everybody. We start today in LA, where those devastating fires continue to burn, but authorities are now hopeful the tide is turning. At least 5 people have been killed and thousands of homes and properties destroyed as 5 fire fronts burn around the city's edges. Almost 180,000 people are currently under evacuation orders. But in an update this morning our time, authorities have expressed hope that dropping winds will allow them to start containing the fire via aerial water bombing. Right now, they are mostly burning out of control, Sash.
Yeah, and also, Chris, what's happening now is the inevitable questions have started about what and potentially who is to blame. So LA's Mayor Karen Bass had this to say this morning.
Historic winds and extensive drought have created a perfect storm that has driven people from their homes and have taken people's homes, and that has taken people's lives.
So there's that aspect. It's dry, it's a tinderbox, there's been droughts. That has obviously contributed, along with the Santa Ana winds, which blow through at this time of year, and it's just created an absolute mess for authorities. But there are further questions being asked about allegations LA's fire hydrants had run out of water and that the city's fire department had been hit by budget cuts in recent months. The mayor has promised a full review once the emergency is brought under control. Now, Donald Trump has also weighed in, and he says Joe Biden and California's Governor Gavin Newsom shoulder the blame for the devastation. The president-elect claiming the state's environmental policies that divert fresh water to preserve wetlands and wildlife were to blame for hydrants running dry. Newsom has responded, and it's really interesting. He spoke to CNN literally in front of burning homes.
People are literally fleeing. People have lost their lives. Kids lost their schools. Families completely torn asunder. Churches burned down. This guy wanted to politicize it.
So obviously very angry that, that Donald Trump had kind of taken this opportunity to make it a political issue. However, as we saw in Australia after the summer 2019-2020 bushfires, questions inevitably are needed to be asked. How authorities were set up, did they deal with it correctly? Did they have the resources they needed? And if not, why? And who is to blame for that? So I think that people are angry in LA and in California, and they will have questions. However, the issue of bringing it up right now as the fires are burning out of control, that's what people are upset about. Look, Joe Biden is expected to address the nation sometime this morning, our time. And also, we've seen looting happening. So 20 people have been arrested in LA for taking advantage of the crisis and breaking into homes. The other thing I've seen, Chris, that's been interesting is the celebrities. Now, obviously, where these fires are burning, especially in the Pacific Palisades area, it is where Hollywood's elite live. That's where they have their homes and that's where their communities are. And we've seen quite a few of them coming out, crying. And yeah, it's been interesting to watch the reaction to that. I had a quick scroll on X this morning and people basically being like, cry me a river. There are people who have no money, who have lost everything. Well, of course, you're going to mourn the loss of your home. Maybe do it privately.
Back home now, new data is showing some Aussies are finally seeing some wage rises. Government analysis shows workers in the private sector are taking home an extra $54 a week, while those in the public sector are pocketing an extra $48 a week. So overall, wage growth in the private sector is sitting at 3.9%, and that's outpacing growth in the public sector, which is at 3.5%. Annually, that means private employees are looking at an increase of $2,808 a year, while those in the public sector are earning an extra $2,496 annually. Employment and Workplace Relations Minister Murray Watt says the wage growth is positive and is helping ease cost of living pressures.
When you think of Birkenstocks, do you think unique work of art? I know I do. I love my stocks.
Speak for yourself.
Well, that is what their German manufacturer is trying to prove in court as they call for the cork-soled sandals to be protected in perpetuity. Basically, they want the exclusive rights to the design. Now, the company has lodged 3 lawsuits against alleged copycat competitors this week, with Birkenstock's lawyers arguing the sandals should be considered works of applied art, which would then give them those exclusive rights to the design. So this case is going to be heard by Germany's highest court, which will have to decide whether or not footwear can be considered applied art in law. So the sandal was introduced in the 1960s. Initially, it wasn't very well received. It was kind of seen as a bit of a, I don't know, like especially in the Western world, like a lefty thing. Like people wore Birkenstocks and you're like, oh God. Yeah. Now they're cool. Do you know how many 30-year-old do you know how many 30-year-old dudes?
Oh, that's bold.
Do you not see all the 30-year-old men wearing Birkenstocks?
No, I see my 50 and 60-year-old aunties wearing them to the shops and around the house.
I think that speaks to our differing social circles because if you walk upstairs to the radio studios, all the young blokes are in Birkenstocks.
Okay.
They're cool. Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting to see what this court rules, whether shoes can be ruled works of art.
And everyone's favourite Blue Healer family is getting the Lego treatment with Bluey-themed sets to hit shelves by the end of this year. But for grown-ups hoping to build the iconic Bluey house, you'll have to lower your expectations, with Lego confirming it'll be creating sets for the 4+ and Duplo ranges, Sash.
Yeah, so no big, like 8,000-piece Bluey sets, unfortunately. Look, this all comes not long after we got the news the global smash hit series is headed to the big screen with a Bluey movie in the works and due to be released in 2027. Of course, Bluey was the most watched show on Disney Plus globally last year and the #1 kids show on CBeebies and the ABC in Australia.
Yeah,
so
huge.
it was only a matter of time before it got the Lego treatment. Chris, have a fabulous weekend. Thanks for being here for the headlines. Next up, it's your deep dive looking at how to be hopeful in 2025.
We're now 10 days into 2025 and I just want to check in. How are you feeling? And what is it that's making you feel that way? You might be happy because you're lapping up some more holiday time. You might be a little blue now that you're back at work, or even a little down because you've tuned into the news and already this year fires have swept LA, there's talk of another virus in China, and we're already hearing about this year's election, which is shaping up to be pretty bitter and contentious. While it's totally normal to battle the New Year scaries, there's still so much to be hopeful about. And this week, the briefing has been exploring how to start 2025 right. So, how do you find the joy amidst all the tough stuff? My guest today is Alexis Fernandez-Preiksa. She's an author and host of the hit podcast Do You Effing Mind, who also happens to have a master's in neuroscience. Alexis, welcome back to the briefing. First off, how can we be hopeful in 2025?
Okay, so hope is something that we can all get better at. Now, I think people might laugh at me talking about hope because I actually have merchandise that says hope is a weak dog. But to clarify, I refer to hope being a weak dog only when you hope for an ex to text you back. So that's where the line comes from. So
Context
when we're
is
talking
important.
about exes, you need to kill hope dead in the water. But when we're talking about good things happening in your life, hope is something that turns you into an optimistic person. It can make you more proactive instead of reactive. It actually changes how you approach neutral things. So if you're someone that doesn't have hope or you're more pessimistic, you'll approach a neutral stimulus and interpret it as a bad thing. Someone else who's waking up on the good side of the bed will approach that same thing and can turn it into a good thing. So it's really important that we can look at things that we can be hopeful for, which in another way of putting it is kind of have faith in something or be optimistic about something or to try and see the good in a situation and how more good can come from that. So a really good way of doing that is you need to limit your consumption of just media in general, good and bad. And the reason for that is that if you're someone that's always on your phone, always consuming social media, obviously a lot of news as well, you're kind of at the mercy to whatever comes your way. So a lot of us use our phones as entertainment, but we don't really know what we're about to entertain ourselves with. So we're kind of a bit of a victim to whatever is thrown in our face. And that can really throw you off quite a bit. It can get you stressed. It can get you a bit anxious, not to mention using these devices all the time already makes you a little bit on edge. So one thing it would be, yes, still consume your news, but maybe be selective with where you consume it or how much time. Maybe it can be, in your morning break, you can go check out what you need to check out and that's it, and then a bit of time on social media. Another thing is make sure that you have real connection with people every day. And what I mean by real connection is a conversation where you are either picking up the phone and calling somebody, or where you are sitting down with somebody and your phones are not in sight, where you're actually able to have a conversation. This kind of connection increases bonding, it increases, feel-good neurochemicals, and you're going to start to feel a lot more optimistic about other things in the day as well.
I guess why we've got you on at this time is that, the new year for a lot of people represents an opportunity at a clean slate. They want to hit the ground running come January 1. What if someone has all those ambitions but finds themselves in a rut that they just can't shake off from last year?
Yeah. So often when we do that, we look at January 1st as like when January hits, and we get so excited about it because it's this thing in the future. When January rolls around, we're not a different person. Nothing happened at midnight. That's, no one's waved a wand, we've turned into someone else. So what actually happens is we get almost more let down because we think, I was expecting more of a change. I was expecting to be motivated. I was expecting all these things. So what you need to do is, number one, stop thinking that there's a version of yourself out there that's willing to do something that you're not willing to do right now. So if you think, I'm not willing to say no to my second slice of cake, and I want to talk about it because I love cake so much, but I can't say no to that. But tomorrow I'll be able to say no. Or I don't want to walk around the block right now, but tomorrow I will. That's not going to happen. So what you want to do is you've got to think, what can I do right now, even if it's a fraction of it, that's going to show that I'm willing to be uncomfortable in order to do my future self a favor. Even if that is get your outfit ready for tomorrow, put the sneakers there, put the activewear on, and just get dressed in it and step outside. And that might be enough for somebody and be like, well, I did that. So if I add another 3 steps, that's better than me scrolling in bed. And it sounds stupid, but it's actually these tiny things that you start to do, that's what's going to create the change. We ruin it for ourselves because we give ourselves 20 things. We're going to be a new person. And it's really difficult to do that because every time you start a new goal, it's conscious effort and it requires energy. You do that for 20 things in your life. At the end of the day, you're exhausted. It's a horrible experience. You're like, I'm never doing that again. Yeah. And so you're back into square one. So that's what I always say. You want to start with something until it becomes habit, and then you go on from there.
Well, which is the perfect segue. It's like you're inside my head because you are big on behaviors and habits.
Yes.
What are 3 things that I can be doing right now, almost before bed or as soon as I wake up, to make sure that I start my day a little more hopeful and a little less chaotic?
Yes. Okay. So one thing that I always will say is, especially in the mornings, but if you're someone that doesn't have the best sleep, then definitely at night. But you want a 1 hour buffer at night and in the morning of no social media use. I don't want to say no technology because you might be reading an audiobook or playing a really basic kind of like Sudoku or something, which is fine for the most part for most people, but absolutely no social media. Nothing where you're going to be getting these dopamine spikes, especially first thing in the morning and first thing at night. So you want to eliminate that completely. You can text, you can call, but none of that. You're going to find that your wind down is a lot better. And when you wake up, you're going to be more willing to do things because you want to think of dopamine as your willingness to do something. And being on your phone, being on anything that gives you a quick hit of dopamine will deplete your dopamine. You've got to look at earned dopamine versus easy dopamine. So if I go for a run, that's earned. It's going to sustain my dopamine. I'm going to feel good. I'm going to have more motivation, more willingness. If I get a quick hit, like pokies, like the phone, like anything that's, shopping, I'll get a bigger spike, but then a bigger drop. And then because my willingness is gone, I'm going to sit there and not be hopeful, not feel good, and so what am I going to do? I reach for my phone again. And we've all done that. And I still do that. If I don't check myself, I notice that I'm just reaching for it again because we're just animals at the end of the day,
I love that. And for people who are listening, you can't see, but Alexis is using a lot of hands to illustrate her points. But everything you're saying is definitely making sense.
So much, and I can't.
Speaking of habits, what are some techniques that we can use to actually stick to our habits? So something that I've been seeing on socials for a little bit now is this concept of habit stacking.
Yes.
What can you tell us about that?
So habit stacking is a really good way of tagging on new behaviors onto an existing behavior that already works for you. So take me, for example. I'm an asthmatic. I will always take my asthma medication morning and night. I just never fail at that because I know how annoying it is not to take it. So that's fine. But I used to want to take vitamins as well, but I would never take the vitamins. And I thought, well, this is ridiculous. I can take my medication. Why can't I take my vitamins? And now that's a stacked habit. Every time I take my medication, I put it next to the vitamins and I do both at the same time. So that's a really basic version of that. But what you want to think about a habit is when you do something often enough, whether it's a thought or whether it's a behavior, you then kind of, I call it subcontracting to the subconscious mind. Ooh. So you give the job to somebody else. You think, all right, I've taught the brain well enough, you can take over from now. So that could be something as like, for most of us, we're never going to go to bed without brushing our teeth. We're like, absolutely not. Even if we're really lit, we are brushing our teeth before we go to bed.
Ain't nobody want to wake up with fuzzy teeth.
No, it's the worst. We hate that. And so little things like that, that's just ingrained in us, you know. Another thing is, the times that you have your first morning coffee or how you drive and the behaviors that you do when you drive. So it's very easy to do something once you repeat it enough for it to become subconscious. When you start a habit, whether it be a morning routine, evening, whatever it is, you start with one thing. Make it become subconscious. And by that, I mean it shouldn't require crazy conscious effort. And then once that's become part of your habitual way of being, then you think, well, can I tag onto this at the same time? Like straight after. So eventually your morning routine can look like instead of just one thing you do, it's then 2, then 3, then 4, and then 5. And it could be 5 things within half an hour. It doesn't have to take an eternity, but it's something that you've got these set things in the morning. Like for me, I wake up, glass of water, meditate, wash my face, brush my teeth, and then I get dressed and I get outside. So those things are done in order. And then it actually opens up room for freedom in the rest of the day. It doesn't create this crazy structure that you can't break out of. It gives you more freedom.
So from the sounds of it, it definitely applies to physical things. So, like you said, taking your medication, even in a way, exercise. Can habit stacking extend to something like hope? Can you habit stack a way of thinking?
Yes, it can, because habits, it's easy. I always say to people, if you're starting off with something new, if you're trying to change your life, start with the physical, because it's a lot easier to train the body than it is the mind. But when you can start to discipline the body, the mind follows, okay? So it's, because the physicality has a lot of impact on the brain in a really positive way. So once you've started a bit of a routine, for example, I want to start adding meditation, you can, instead of meditation or alongside it, you can think, I'm going to list a couple of things that I'm going to be really excited for today. I'm really actually going to look forward to that encounter with my colleague that I actually really like. I'm going to pay attention to that this time. I can't wait for that dinner with my girlfriend tonight. I haven't seen her. I can't. So then you start thinking, I'm priming myself for the day. I'm priming myself. And instead of focusing on the fact that I forgot to pay the bill and now it's overdue and now, I'm thinking, well, yes, that still exists, but it's not in the forefront of my awareness. I can deal with it, but I'm really looking forward to these things. I'm really feeling good. And when you start to feel hopeful about things and something good's going to happen, or, I'm excited that this may happen for me, or I'm putting my effort into this, then you'll notice things start happening for you because you're just more aware. You're more primed to, receive and work alongside things that work for you.
I do want to talk about something that's at the forefront of my mind and a lot of Aussies at the moment. We're in summer at the moment.
Yes.
Personally, I am happiest in summer. I say that about myself a lot, which, we can talk at length after about how I can correct that thinking. Seasonal depression is a thing.
Yes.
How does someone avoid that slump that might come with a change in season?
Yeah, so it's actually called SAD, seasonal affective disorder.
What a perfect acronym. What a perfect acronym.
So funny when I read that. I was like, oh, God. But yeah, and it actually happens, especially in countries where it's really dark in winter and people get quite depressed, and then come summer, they're not depressed anymore. They feel really good. And there's a huge reason for that. And the reason is the sun and our circadian clock. So our circadian rhythm, which is our body clock. The sunlight, getting sunlight first thing in the morning has a huge impact on the neurochemicals that are being released, how it's waking up the brain properly. When you have a healthy body clock, you sleep better, and everything works well. That's why shift workers really struggle a lot with, many issues, and love that we have them and so grateful for them. But it is a lot harder for them because they're not getting that proper circadian rhythm cycle that someone with a regular job would have. So things that you can do to combat this is, when you wake up in the morning, you want to get up, you want to get the biggest source of blue light possible, which is the sun. You want to wake up with a huge source of blue light. If it's winter, even more reason to get up and try and find as much daylight as possible. Because in summer, it's kind of shining through earlier in the morning. In winter, you kind of have to go out and be in the sunlight. You want to move your body, get your heart rate up. If you're not someone that likes to go to the gym, just, sit to stand, anything, dance, who cares? Just get your heart rate up, get blood flowing to the brain. That's going to increase that healthy levels of cortisol. And that level of cortisol in the morning, coupled with exercise and sunlight, you get cortisol, you get dopamine. Now you're ready for the day. You're feeling better. You're more willing to do things. And then your mood is elevated for the rest of the day. So it's super important. And then a coffee. Great. Coffee's
coffee.
great.
Oh, thank God it's part of this. For you.
Yeah. And ideally you want to have coffee about an hour after waking, just so you give yourself time to wake naturally. It requires a bit more effort to feel happy because you think I need to get myself in the sun, I need to make sure I'm moving, I need to do these things, but it definitely will start to kind of curb that sadness that you feel. And then try and include things that are seasonal. For example, in winter, what can you do that you look forward to in winter that you don't do in summer? Maybe you can have pasta making nights with your friends in winter, pottery thing. You do cute things in winter that it's like, this is a different season for me. It's my nesting season versus my wild gal era season. So, and you kind of go between the two and then you can make it something to look forward to.
Well, you know what? That actually makes a lot of sense because I know for me, like the football season kicks off in the winter and that's something that I look forward to.
Exactly.
You know what? I retract my earlier statement. I'm not a seasonal boy.
I love football.
I love football and I love winter. Hey, look, I want to move on now to something else that you've spoken about in the past, and it's really topical now because there's some people who are coming back to work and they've got the return to work blues. You've spoken about in the past about not falling into the trap of loving Fridays and weekends and living for the weekends. How does one not live for Friday and live for the weekends?
Yeah, so obviously it's fine to be excited for that because it's your time off. It's when you're going to have a lot more freedom with your time if you work a 9 to 5. But what we don't want to do is discard the Monday to Thursday and part of Friday and think, well, that's a write-off. It's going to be a bad time. It's a slog. You get the Sunday scaries. You really hate waking up on a Monday morning and you just have to push through. That's really unhealthy because you think that's more than half of your life. So what you want to be doing instead is, like I mentioned earlier, what are we doing with our daily routines and our daily behaviors that make us actually look forward to our day? And you can include things in your day. Obviously, everyone's at a different starting point. Some people have more responsibilities. Some people have more dependence. Some people have more money than others. But with the resources that you've got, what are things that you can do that make you feel that you're working towards something that matters to you day to day? We all have a purpose, even if it's unrealized, but we all have a reason for getting up in the morning. If you can keep that forefront Monday through to Sunday of why am I getting up in the morning? And that purpose may be, I want every person that, well, maybe not everyone because, oh God, but I want most people that interact with me to feel better than when they, when they leave me than when they arrive. So your purpose can be something quite simple, but it's like, I want to positively impact someone's mood or I want to teach one person something that I've learned from someone else and I want to pass it on. It could be, I want to make a stranger smile today. So people think that a purpose has to be super deep. It's just got to be meaningful for you and it's got to make you useful to people outside of you. So you kind of want to feel useful. If you feel useful, if you feel fulfilled, if you wake up thinking, this is what I'm going to do today and it's really, if I go to bed and I've done that thing, I'm going to feel good. If that's at the front of your awareness, even if it's the smallest thing, it will turn around, it will transform how you feel Monday to Friday.
Oh, I love this so much. And hey, look, we are running out of time, so I will squeeze in one last question for you. If I feel like I'm not getting there myself and I need a bit more support, where should I start?
So I think that one of the main things is look at the idea of accountability buddies. And it depends what you're referring to, obviously. There's the idea of I feel stuck, I don't know where I'm going, I don't know what I'm doing. And then there's people that suffer from mood disorders where you're wanting to go down, do I need to speak to somebody? Can I get actual cognitive behavioral therapy tools that help me kind of structure my mind a little bit so I feel more organized in my mind? But for the most part, I think getting a community around you, whether it's you hitting up your best friend saying, listen, I don't know about you, but this is what I want to start doing. Could you check in with me every single day? Or can we do this together? And then even if you're both novices in it, sometimes it's actually quite fun to start something with someone who also does it. So you're both the blind leading the blind and you have a really good time. And it's something that you can do just kind of to work through it together where you're able to communicate with someone about your journey, where you don't feel like you're embarrassed to share it, you're embarrassed to talk about it. A lot of people don't start because they feel they're starting at square one and they're, it's a bit mortifying and they don't want to talk to other people about it. So I would say that's where to start, definitely.
Oh, Alexis, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing yet again.
Thank you for having me.
That was host of Do You Effing Mind, Alexis Fernandez-Preiksa there. And hey, Alexis's audiobook, How to Chase Change 30 Days to Master Your Mindset, is out now. Definitely worth a listen. And if you want to find out a little bit more about Alexis, you can obviously check out her podcast. But we had her on the Weekend Briefing back in December 2023. Just search Alexis Fernandez-Preiksa in your feed and that chat with Antoinette Lattouf will come up. With that being said, that is it for this episode of The Briefing. Before you go, though, we'd love it if you could share this episode with someone who you think might enjoy it. It's a really easy way you can support us and everything that we do here at The Briefing. So we're sharing our social posts. You can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and on TikTok and YouTube. Just search Listener Newsroom. And don't forget, we'll be back in your feed from 3 p.m. this afternoon. I'm Spyrou. Catch you next time.
Listener.